Are you ready for a little sizzle on your Sunday with the youngest sports commentator in American radio? Here's Tristan Blackman with the Sideline Sizzle.
Welcome to another edition of the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. We have been covering my predictions for the 2023 NFL regular season the past few weeks. Last week we covered the AFC North. This week we're covering the NFC West. I think the NFC West is a pretty top-heavy division, with the 49ers and Seahawks on top, and then the Cardinals and Rams really dragging the competition level down. We will dive right into that, but first, I'd like to take a look at a bit of an unorthodox sports report that came out about a Chiefs superfan that is actually a convicted bank robber. So if you haven't heard of this story, I don't quite blame you. It isn't necessarily occurring within the league or anything. Most news that I tend to keep up with typically revolves around the players, coaching staff, and ownership concerns every now and then. This story is different though. Chiefs superfan Xavier Michael Babudar, aka Chiefsaholic, has been on the run from not only local and state police forces, but the FBI. And this has been going down for months too, but as of a few days ago, he was finally tracked down and arrested. Babudar was taken into custody on Friday, July 7th in Lincoln, California, which is right outside Sacramento, California. This guy was a criminal mastermind because when I say he was a bank robber, I don't mean he robbed like one or two banks. This guy hit multiple different banks in multiple different states and stole over $1 million in total. Let's not pretend like $1 million isn't a lot of money, because if you think about that, it's an absurd amount for some random Chiefs fan to just steal from like several different banks. This wasn't some random Chiefs fan though. This was a Chiefs super fan, and apparently a brilliant thief. And like all good thieves, he needed to know what to do with his money aside from spending it on Chiefs season tickets. So not only was Babudar involved in striking a series of banks throughout his travels, but he was also involved in copious laundering schemes for his money. How did he launder his money? Well, it's fairly simple, to be honest. Babudar would use a series of various bank accounts as well as cashing in a good portion of his money into casino chips. When I say a good portion of his money, I mean all of his money. In fact, the exact amount that he stole from each bank, he converted into casino chips each different time. Not the brightest move, but we'll get into that. Now, Chiefsaholic was initially wanted back in December after he, being a superfan who attended every Chiefs game he could, went silent on media outlets like Twitter and Instagram while skipping regular season games. What I find funny about this whole thing is that Babudar actually is rumored to have removed his ankle monitor to attend Chiefs games, and nobody at the games would bat an eye. He's also rumored to have worn the same mask he wears to Chiefs games to hide his identity during a robbery. I just thought that was funny. Those are rumors though, and based on everything I've seen, I wouldn't consider that to be a fact or anything. Sounds pretty difficult to me considering he has such a big media presence and jumps up and down with a Chiefs banner at all the games. He also is probably the only person at each game dressed in a full-body wolf costume, so you'd think he would have been caught a long time ago, huh? Now, apparently news broke about him fleeing from authorities back in late March, meaning he has been on the run for around 4 months. But now, he has finally been caught, and I assure you he will face hefty jail time. Me being a Broncos fan, this entire scenario is just so funny to me that a Chiefs superfan of all people is the real culprit for all of these crazy crimes. Getting into the specifics of just how much money this Chiefsaholic guy stole, it was over $1 million, as I mentioned earlier. But to put things into perspective, Babudar robbed banks and credit unions from all over the Midwest. He stole $70,000 from Great Western Bank in Clive, Iowa. He also stole about $25,000 from First Interstate Bank, also located in Clive, Iowa. His biggest heist came against the First Class Community Credit Union located in Des Moines, Iowa, in which he exited with a massive haul of over $300,000. I'm not going to keep up with the specifics, but he also hit locations of various banks in Tennessee, Oklahoma, Illinois, and of course Iowa and Nebraska. Unless I'm mistaken, I believe that there are also unsolved robberies within the Minnesota area that have been linked to Chiefsaholics as well. Not completely certain though. So far up to my knowledge, this Chiefsaholic guy has only received 2 charges, I believe along the lines of bank theft and transporting stolen property across state lines. Don't fret though, this guy has allegedly received more charges and penalties on top of this, and I can't imagine he'll be getting off easy in this case. This guy eluded national authorities for 4 months. What do you think his punishment will be? Moving on from all the serious crime talk, we've got some teams to cover within the NFC West. As I said when we introduced the show, I've been covering each NFL team's 2023 regular season schedule, division by division, and this week we are looking at the NFC West. We'll kick things off starting with probably the saddest team in the entire NFL right now, the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, it's not going to be surprising to see Arizona struggle this season. At this point, it isn't even a subjective opinion, it's more or less like a fact. It would be the biggest shock if the Cardinals have a winning season this year, and I feel foolish even throwing out that idea because this team is awful on paper, and they have a first-year head coach, way too many variables. This team's going to be horrible, and just to be upfront, I chose Arizona to have the worst record in the NFL this coming season. So, let's start with Week 1. As they face the Washington Commanders, I'm giving them a loss here. I could see the Cardinals maybe keeping it close, but I'm very doubtful. Then I have them picking up losses in Weeks 2 through 5 as they play the Giants, then Cowboys, then 49ers, and then the Bengals. All potential playoff teams, all of which are more than capable of beating this dumpster fire of a team. In Week 6, the Cardinals play the Rams, potentially a close game in LA, but I have Arizona losing. Then Week 7 is their first date with the Seahawks, another divisional opponent here, also a game on the road, and I have them losing here. To speed things up, the next 4 games are all losses as they play the Ravens, Browns, Falcons, and Texans. These are games they might have the best chance of winning outside of their division, but I've got them falling to each of these teams. Week 12 at home against the Rams, I finally have the Cardinals getting a win. I think the Rams are a far better team. Well, maybe not far better, but they hold the advantage. However, I think they could split with Arizona this year. They then move on to face the Seahawks on the road. They'll lose there and then move on to the bye week. After the bye week, it's not pretty. They face the 49ers again in Week 15, which should be a loss. Then they go up against the Bears in Week 16, another one of those games they have a chance to win but probably won't capitalize on, so there's another loss. And to close things out, they play the Eagles in Week 17, pretty much a guaranteed loss, followed by the Seahawks in Week 18. Now, with the Seahawks, they could potentially upset this team given it is a home game for the Cardinals. I just doubt it, though. I've seen some people saying Arizona could split with Seattle, but I honestly don't think so. The Seahawks aren't perfect or anything, but they were a playoff contender last year, despite the fact it was a very narrow entry for them. So with that said, give the Cardinals another loss, and that would put their final record at 1 win and 16 losses. Yeah, it sounds pretty bad, but this league is getting more and more competitive, and Arizona is just not a very competitive team at the moment. I think losing DeAndre Hopkins was the final straw for this team, and with Kyler Murray's return looking very uncertain, who knows what could happen with this team. Well, actually, I do. They won't do well this season, and that's just the sad reality. Moving on to our next team in the Los Angeles Rams, a team that had probably the biggest Super Bowl slump in NFL history, going from league champions to nearly the worst team in the NFL. Last season was downright brutal for this team, especially considering how they capped off the season beforehand. It serves the Rams right, though, because they practically bought their Super Bowl victory, transitioning their team out of St. Louis and into a supposedly bigger market, giving away all their future draft capital to haul in players like Jalen Ramsey, Matthew Stafford, Von Miller, and more. They also spent a lot of money in free agency, signing a wide variety of players that cost them quite the pretty penny. Was it worth it in the end? I don't know. They did get the Super Bowl ring they were chasing, but look at what it cost them to attain it. Plus, all those bandwagon fans that the ownership group thought would really improve their franchise and expand their fan base abandoned this team after the first 6 games of last season. And yes, after shifting out of St. Louis and moving to Los Angeles to practically rebrand everything about the team except for the mascot, they are in quite the conundrum. See, in the sports world, Los Angeles has recently tended to struggle in the pro football sphere of things. It just isn't a big football city anymore, in my opinion. Look at the fan bases. The Rams, now that they're in the gutter, are struggling, and the Chargers, who are still competitors, mind you, are doing even worse with their fan base. Every home game for them is more like an away game. You know why? Because all their fans were left behind in San Diego. Similarly to the Rams, shifting away from St. Louis. Granted, San Diego is much closer to LA than St. Louis, but with the Rams, they were already located in Los Angeles for many decades before moving to St. Louis in 1995. I guess this long-winded monologue is just me pointing out that all of this could have been avoided because it seemed like as soon as St. Louis had gotten comfortable with the Rams in their city, they packed their bags and left. So with all that said, Los Angeles Rams have seen better days, and while they still have superstars like Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp, they have failed to improve the team whatsoever since their very forgettable Super Bowl win back in 2021 to 2022. Before we jump into the schedule, I just have to say, my prediction is a little bit harsh, but I have good reason. Los Angeles has 2 tough divisional opponents layered on top of an already rough schedule as they play teams among the likes of the Eagles, Bengals, Ravens, Cowboys, and more. So, in Week 1, the Rams will face the Seattle Seahawks on the road in Seattle. I'm not going to lie, this game will probably be a loss for Los Angeles. Seattle started strong last year, and I'm sure they can do it again. The Rams then move on to face the 49ers in Week 2. Regardless of whether or not it is a home game, I've got them losing here. Week 3 is a road game against the Bengals, another loss for the Rams there. Week 4 is a winnable matchup against the Colts, but it is another road game here, and I think Indianapolis, as bad as they may be right now, could actually take down the Rams in this game. All that is banking on Anthony Richardson's play, though. If he does bad, then the team in turn will do very bad, but this prediction is banking on him having a positive impact on the Colts. Moving on to Week 5, a tough game against the Eagles here. Should be another loss for the Rams. Week 6, they have their first date with the Cardinals. I'm going to give them a win here, a good first win of the season. They then move on to Week 7, where they play the Steelers. Working off of some momentum from the Cardinals game, I actually have them winning this one. A bit of an upset, mostly for Steelers fans who think they're Super Bowl bound, might be in need of a reality check there, but hey, maybe I'm the one who needs a reality check. I just think the Rams are talented enough to take down some talented teams, but not win consistently, if that makes sense. Week 8, they do face the Cowboys, a tough loss for the Rams here, followed by another risky opponent in the Green Bay Packers. Just to clarify, I do not think the Dallas Cowboys and Green Bay Packers are on the same level, but I do think the Rams will lose to both of these teams here before the bye week. And after the bye week in Week 10, the Rams have time to recover and will play the Seahawks at home in Los Angeles. I think the Rams split with Seattle this season, so I have them picking up a win here. Then they move on to face the Cardinals again here in Week 12. Here I've got the Rams actually losing to Arizona. My philosophy of this game is that the Cardinals, they've got to get at least one win, right? So why not the Rams? After this loss to Arizona, maybe it's another big injury that happens, maybe a mid-season trade occurred a few weeks prior, I don't know. What I do know is that the final stretch for Los Angeles is not necessarily easy, and I have them going on a losing tear. I think at this point, if the Rams are sitting with just 3 wins on the season, playoff hopes are gone, this team isn't going anywhere with this current roster, the Rams might start to tank. So in Week 13, they play the Browns. Boom, a loss in that game there. Week 14, another AFC North opponent in the Ravens. Boom, a loss for them there too. Week 15, Los Angeles may have a chance against Washington. A fairly even match here, but I have the Rams losing this game as well. Then in Week 16, the Rams play the Saints. Now with Derek Carr, probably looking towards winning the NFC South this season. The Rams will lose this one too. Week 17 is a road game against the New York Giants, and that will sadly be another loss for them as well. And to close out the season in Week 18, the Rams face the 49ers, who will not be playing around at all. Probably looking for a postseason bye week with that number 1 seed. Give the Rams another loss to close out the season. Sadly, not everybody can be a winner, but Los Angeles had their chance and had their moment. Now it's time to enter rebuild mode. With the predictions I've given, Los Angeles would be sitting with a pleasant record of 3 wins and 14 losses. This team has the talent and coaching staff to win some big games, but not enough firepower to win big games consistently. Don't be surprised if the Rams creep into a 6 or 7 win season, but if they go anywhere near 9 wins or above, then I would be very surprised. You've been listening to the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. With that, we have covered the Arizona Cardinals and Los Angeles Rams schedule for 2023, 2 of the most disappointing teams for this upcoming season, in my opinion, at least in the NFC. There's no hate for these teams, it's all love. I'm just saying that these 2 teams don't have much good in store for them this coming season. We still have 2 more teams to cover, these units with a little more hope on the horizon for 2023. I'll break down both the Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers season records coming up next.
We're talking football. You got a problem with that? This is the Sideline Sizzle.
Welcome back to the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. Last segment, we took a look at the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams and their schedules for 2023. We also looked at a Kansas City superfan turned bank robber, but that's not our focus for right now. We've been looking at each team's schedule for 2023, and I've been giving my prediction for how I think each team will perform this coming season, doing it division by division. This week we're looking at the NFC West, and we will resume things by checking out the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers were just a game away from the Super Bowl last season before falling to the Eagles. In all fairness, the Eagles were loaded, and San Francisco hasn't had a guaranteed starter at the quarterback position. Sure, Brock Purdy was great given he was the last pick in the NFL draft, but is he really QB1 for 2023? With former number 3 overall pick Trey Lance, the Niners are looking to give him a full season to perform and show off whether or not he has what it takes. They also have Sam Darnold sitting on the bench, who has quite the amount of starting experience for a young guy. Then again, he's also got a lot of experience throwing interceptions, so I doubt he makes a push to be the Niners' next quarterback. In my eyes, and I don't know what goes on behind the scenes in San Francisco, but in my eyes, the real race is between Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. Supposedly, Brock Purdy was given the benefit of the doubt over Trey Lance. To me, that is pretty obvious considering he has actually started several games, including playoff games, and actually performed well. Trey Lance, on the other hand, how many games has he started? Like 2 or 3? Very small sample size. Personally, I loved Trey Lance coming out of college. I wanted Denver to draft him, but it didn't work out. It is what it is, though. We got Patrick Surtain in that draft, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I think Lance has the physical frame and athletic ability to be a dual-threat quarterback in some regards. If he works on his game, he should be able to extend plays with no trouble. And given he is in the 49ers lineup, I think he has all the tools he needs to succeed and then some. So if Lance somehow finds a way to struggle in San Francisco, then I doubt the NFL is for him. So let's kick things off with Week 1. The Niners will be on the road in Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. I think opening the season, San Francisco could still be determining who their true quarterback is. It could get dicey in the first couple of weeks for the Niners, like we saw last year. I mean, they lost to Denver for crying out loud, and that was with Russell Wilson, but then they moved on and managed to become one of the top seeds in the NFC. It wouldn't surprise me if they struggled to open the season and actually lose to Pittsburgh in Week 1, but because I love the Niners roster on paper, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I have them winning here. Week 2 is a road game against the Los Angeles Rams, and again, if they struggle to open the season, it could be a loss, but LA is far from the same team they used to be. Give me the Niners in this game. Week 3 is a matchup against the New York Giants, one of the more competitive teams now in the NFC with Brian Daboll leading things. I think it could be a battle of the mind situation between two great coaches in Kyle Shanahan and Daboll, but I have San Francisco winning this one. Week 4 is a game against the Cardinals, easy win for the 49ers here. Then in Week 5, they play the Dallas Cowboys. I think this game will probably be their toughest matchup to this point in the season. Dallas has a competitive defense that could put San Francisco in check. Plus, if Trey Lance is still learning the ropes, Trayvon Diggs or the newly acquired Stephon Gilmore could get some interceptions off this guy. I do think the 49ers might just be the NFC's best team alongside the Philadelphia Eagles, so I have them beating Dallas here. Week 6, the 49ers move on to play the Browns. I think San Francisco has this one in the bag and will pick up a win here unless Deshaun Watson returns to his full form. Moving on to Week 7, a road game in Minnesota to play the Vikings. This road environment is a little tough, simply because of how loud it gets in this stadium. But then the 49ers are more than capable of locking down Kirk Cousins with their stellar defense. Give them another win. Week 8 is a tough one for the 49ers as they play Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are a tough team, no doubt, and I think Burrow is at the very top of the quarterback game, at least a top 5 quarterback, maybe even top 3 in my opinion. It'll be a good game to watch, that's for sure. I think Cincinnati will come out on top, though, and force San Francisco's first loss of the season. The Niners move into the bye week in Week 9. They'll have time to get rest and reflect on their loss before taking on the Jaguars in Week 10. The Jaguars will hopefully be a much more improved team from last season. They started out rough, but turned things around and showed how competitive they can be. This is their chance to really put themselves on the map as a top contender in the AFC. Trevor Lawrence going into year 3 could take a few massive steps up in his play. I have the Jaguars winning this one somewhat shockingly. So after falling to the Jaguars, San Francisco moves on to battle the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which should be an easy win for them in this game. They then play the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, and I think they actually lose this game here. The Seahawks are a bit of a tough divisional opponent. The 49ers won't be perfect in every game, so I'd say losing to a rival on the road is bound to happen. Then in Week 13, the 49ers play the Philadelphia Eagles, a rematch of the conference championship game from last year. I think on paper, The Eagles are the better team, but just slightly. Most of this comes from Jalen Hurts at quarterback compared to, well, we don't know yet. And that's the problem. If Trey Lance blossoms into who we know he can be, then I think the Niners are the better team. I do have the 49ers winning this game, but they need to be careful with the Eagles this season and actually figure out who their quarterback is. Regardless, though, this will probably be one of the best games we see all season. Following that game, San Francisco goes on a winning tear where they close out the season just like they did last year, all wins. Week 14, it's a rematch with the Seahawks and should get a good win at home. They then play the Cardinals in Week 15, an easy win for them there. Week 16 is a tougher game for them as they face the Ravens, but knowing how Baltimore performs on the road, it should be a win for San Francisco. Week 17 is a date with the Washington Commanders, a no-brainer here. San Francisco can pick up a solid win here, and to close things out in Week 18, they face the Los Angeles Rams, finishing the season on their own home turf and taking down LA with relative ease heading into the playoffs. I think the 49ers are bound for another season like last year, hopefully with a little more consistency at quarterback, which should help in a big way. The 49ers are probably my favorite team on paper in the NFC right now, and they could be headed towards a Super Bowl, we'll see. Anyway, their final record on the year would be 14 wins and just 3 losses. A pretty generous prediction as I can see them hovering more around that 12 to 13 win margin, but I think 14 wins fits this team. They are in store for hopefully a good season in 2023. And the last NFC West team we'll take a look at is the Seattle Seahawks, who surprised a lot of people last year. The Seahawks shocked the NFL in some regards after many believed they wouldn't perform well at all once Russell Wilson was traded. It was quite the contrary though, and in fact it seems like all it took was Russell Wilson to be traded in order for them to really hit their ceiling. The craziest part about last season is that they basically exceeded their own ceiling. I for one thought they'd be among the worst teams in the league last season. I also thought Denver with Russell Wilson would reach the playoffs, but apparently the Broncos can't have any nice things. The Seahawks defense, coached by Pete Carroll, showed that they can perform well when it matters, and with new additions like Draymond Jones, Bobby Wagner, along with several big additions through the draft like Devon Witherspoon, this defense looks good. Offensively, they added a few pieces as well, most notably was Jackson Smith and Jigba through the draft, a good slot receiver that will thrive in this Seahawks offense. If Geno Smith doesn't take a step back in his play, then this team should be pretty decent, I'd say. Starting in Week 1, the Seahawks play the Rams at home, which should be a somewhat easy game for them and hopefully a win. Week 2 is a matchup between the Seahawks and Lions. This game will be much closer and much tougher for Seattle, especially since they narrowly beat this team last year. That was before Detroit gained a lot more talent on their roster, so Seattle could be at risk of losing this game, and it wouldn't shock me if they do. However, I do have Seattle going 2-0 to start and picking up a win here in this game. Week 3 is a matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Should be a win for them there. Week 4 had the Seahawks catching their first loss to the New York Giants. With Brian Daboll, I think the Giants are poised for a pretty good season in 2023, and with additions like Darren Waller, their offense will be more prepared to face this Seahawks defense. The Seahawks will face the Bengals after the bye week in Week 5, and this game I think is a loss for Seattle. Seattle has the potential to keep things close, but I expect them to struggle against this team. In Week 7, the Seahawks play the Cardinals, and that should be an easy win there. They then move on to play the Browns, and I think Cleveland could actually beat the Seahawks here. I just am a little uncertain about Deshaun Watson still. This game could be one of those where Watson proves that he can ball out, but seeing as though this takes place in Seattle, I can't have Cleveland winning here. The Seahawks then move on to play the Ravens, and here I have them losing. As long as Lamar Jackson is healthy, then this game should decisively be in the Ravens' hands. But even if not, I have faith in their defense to hold Geno Smith and the Seahawks to limited points. Week 10 is a game against the Washington Commanders for Seattle, and it's a game I have the Seahawks winning. In Week 11, the Seahawks have a rematch with the Rams, and I think Los Angeles will actually force a loss here. Look, Los Angeles isn't all that bad, and I'm confident that they can split their series with the Seahawks this year. Week 12 may be a bit of a shocker for Seattle, as I have them actually taking down the 49ers here at Lumen Field in Seattle. The crowd will be going nuts in this game, and I think the Seahawks have what it takes to win a very important home game that carries a lot of weight in the division. Then, after a great win, the Seahawks will move on to face the Dallas Cowboys in Week 13. Even though it is a road game, I think Seattle rides a wave of momentum and takes down Dallas as well. However, after this game in Week 13, I have the Seahawks slipping a little bit here, as in Week 14 they play the 49ers once again and take on a hard loss this time. Then in Week 15, they move on to another tough opponent in the Eagles. Man, back-to-back is really tough. Seattle will get crushed in this game here. they do get a breath of fresh air here in Week 16 when they face the Tennessee Titans. Definitely a winnable game for them here. Week 17 is a tough game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, though, a team that matches up fairly well with the Seahawks, and I have them picking up a big win. I think Pittsburgh has what it takes to knock down this Seahawks team, regardless of it being a tough road game for them. Then to close things out in Week 18, Seattle gets a pleasant matchup with the Cardinals, a game that should rest easy in the hands of the Seahawks, whom I have winning this one. Not that bad of a schedule for Seattle. I think they can use some aspects of their schedule to their advantage, but there are some very tough opponents hidden in there. We saw the Bengals, Eagles, 49ers twice. It could be a rough one for the Seahawks. However, I have them rising to the occasion and finishing the season with a final record of 10 wins and 7 losses in 2023. Alright, that was my prediction for the NFC West in 2023. We went team by team, game by game, and hopefully my thoughts for each team hold up when the season actually begins. Final standings in the division based on my predictions would put San Francisco in first place, followed by Seattle, then Los Angeles, and finally Arizona coming in last place. Basically the same exact standings as last year in the NFC West. With that is all we've got for this edition of the Sideline Sizzle, brought to you by the City of Conway Parks and Recreation Department and the Biddle Law Firm. Make sure to tune in next week when we cover my favorite division in the NFL, the AFC West, and we will of course cover the Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, and my favorite, the Denver Broncos, in depth. And now with all that said, we'll catch you next week.